All right, I am Michael Richardson, and this is Yarn 2, a next generation package manager. So, like many good things, it all started with a tweet. In August of 2019, I replied to a tweet and mentioned that I had tried out the Yarn feature PNP. Now, the lead maintainer of Yarn replied encouraging me to try out Yarn 2. I did. I was impressed. I also fairly quickly encountered a minor edge case bug, which, even more impressively, got fixed quite promptly. Now, that was just over a year ago, and Yarn 2 has come a long way since then. I'm going to stop for just a second to make sure everybody is seeing this okay. Can you respond in the chat if that was working, if you were seeing the slides okay? Did you have them before? Okay, good. I just can't see them when I see the chat when I have the slides up, so I dropped it down for a second. All right, let's restart. All right, but before I get too far ahead of myself, let's talk about Yarn Classic, the 1X version. Yarn made a big splash when it came on the scene a few years back, and it was an alternative to the default package manager at the time, NPM. Yarn promised better performance and more reliable, repeatable builds, in part due to a unique lock file. Now, I've used Yarn fairly consistently for several years now, and I've really enjoyed it. Yarn 2 is a significant re-architecture and rewrite of the Yarn project. It improves on a variety of features from the original Yarn. It adds a few more, and it defaults to a really impressive package install method called plug and play. So let's skim over some of the improvements real quick. First of all, the console output is really clean and easy to read, as you'll see later. Yarn has great support for Yarn 2 has great support for workspaces. Yarn 1 already supported them, but Yarn 2 is a big advancement, offering a lot of improvements there. There's a new command called Yarn DLX that can be used to run one-off scripts. It's a lot like npx, but it's actually safer. And the Yarn project is highly modular and allows for really easy development of plugins. So if you want to extend it, that becomes much simpler. Some of the core functionality of Yarn is actually implemented as plugins. But the real star, in my mind, of Yarn 2 is the use of plug and play as the default install strategy. Plug and play is usually shortened to PNP, and we'll use that acronym throughout the rest of the talk. So, what is plug and play? In order to understand PNP, we should first understand what it's not and why it's different from the current method of package installation. To do that, we have to talk about Node. Give a little Node history here. When resolving module references, Node looks for the appropriate file in the Node modules folder using a method called require.resolve. Now, for our purposes, we don't have to know the ugly details of how resolve works. Frankly, I don't know how it works because I haven't had a need to. I leave that to the package manager authors. Until I do have a need, I have better things to do, like building software, taking hikes in the woods, and watching movies with my family. Node has resolved modules this way since before package managers even existed. Node came first. That means the package managers have to be compatible with Node's resolution logic. They have to do it Node's way, and that means copying files into Node modules. This takes time, and it introduces a variety of issues, some of which you may already be familiar with. So, for example, creating folders nested so deeply that they can't be easily deleted. Thank you, Windows, for that. Or a node modules folder with more than 160,000 files and over a gigabyte in size. That's what I work with at my day job. The web of package dependencies creates complex folder structures, and they always seem to get messed up. Anybody ever have to rim raft their node modules to get the project to build? It's kind of a pain in the butt. So this sounds like a fantastic system, right? Maybe we'll find something different. So let's talk about PNP. So how do we solve this problem? Let's say we want to avoid these issues that we've encountered with node modules. How do we get around it? This problem may seem intractable. We need our packages, and Node needs them to be arranged properly in the node modules folder. In a way, it seems like we're stuck. So how can we stop playing by Node's rules and start playing by our own rules? The answer that Yarn came up with is to simply override Node's built-in methods for module resolution. You may or may not know, but JavaScript is so flexible that you can actually override core pieces of functionality and essentially say, yeah, don't do that, do this instead. It's kind of ridiculous, but in this case, ridiculously useful. Yarn overrides require resolve and FS, the file system API. This allows Yarn to play person in the middle, setting its own rules for module resolution. Now, as a result, Yarn can store the packages however is most convenient for Yarn and the user. So what might a better system look like? Here's the way that Yarn PNP lays it out. Yarn stores each package as a single file, a compressed zip archive in a dedicated Yarn cache folder. Now, when Node needs a file from a package, Yarn intercepts that request, reaches into the zip archive, pulls out the requested file, and hands it to Node. Node gets the file at once, Yarn can do perfect module resolution, and everyone is happy. Most of all, me, because I don't have to deal with node modules anymore. Now, this system is so much more compact than using node modules that you can actually commit this package cache to your Git repository. Yarn supports a workflow called zero install, where a repository can be cloned and then the application can be run immediately with no install step necessary. Now, zero install is not required. You don't have to commit your package cache, but it is a really convenient, reliable workflow. Using zero installs means that your builds are no longer dependent on any external package registry or even network access for that matter. Everything that you need to build and run your application is part of your source control repo. In this scenario, you only need the package repository when adding or upgrading packages. Now, not every project works with PNP right out of the box. The Node ecosystem has been living with node modules for a long time. Some packages and tools have come to expect the node modules folder, and therefore they've implemented code that wasn't compatible with PNP. Another potential challenge is that PNP is more strict than using node modules. The node modules folder and structure allows packages to reference other packages without declaring them as a dependency. Doing this has always been unsafe behavior, but it still worked. Now, with PNP, these unsafe access attempts are now called as errors so that they can be fixed properly. We'll see how to deal with that a little bit later. Now, the Yarn team has made huge efforts on fixing all of these different issues in other projects, raising issues, making pull requests to help bring projects into compliance. These changes benefit not just Yarn users, but all of the users of each of these packages. So if you encounter issues, you should first check that you are using the most recent version of a package to make sure that it's because usually the most recent version is going to be compatible with Yarn 2. Most popular libraries and frameworks are now compatible with PnP, and many of them are moving to use Yarn 2 for building the projects themselves. Projects such as Babel and Jest are now using Yarn 2 internally. Now, there are also a couple of standouts that still don't support PnP. The biggest ones to be aware of are React Native and Flow. But both of these are still completely compatible with Yarn 2 by utilizing the built-in node modules linker. Let's talk a little bit about upgrading an existing project to Yarn 2. It's actually quite simple, really. The complex part of upgrading to Yarn 2 is making sure that your project is compatible with PnP. I do recommend using PnP if you can. It really is wonderful. But Yarn 2 also supports working with node modules, like I mentioned. If you have a relatively simple project, perhaps it's just a simple React app or an Express server, upgrading to use PnP may be downright trivial. Other less simple projects may encounter more challenges in the upgrade. If you don't want to upgrade to PnP or even Yarn 2 in all your projects at once, you really don't have to. Yarn 2 is designed to be enabled on a per project basis. So since the 1.0 of Yarn, it has had a feature that I like to call version pinning. Essentially, this allows you to embed a specific version of Yarn into your project. Everyone who runs Yarn on your project will use that version, regardless of what version they have installed globally. This is fantastic. It solves all kinds of problems with version compatibility, and you should do it on all your Yarn projects today, regardless of whether you move them to Yarn 2 or not. When you do go to migrate, you definitely want to take a look at the docs. The Yarn migration docs have drastically improved over time, and they're very instructive and helpful when you encounter errors. All right, let's move into demo time and take a look at a couple examples. Take me a minute here to get set up. Everybody following along smoothly so far? Any questions? All right. Let me switch screens. All right, we'll start with something simple, right? Let's start with a really standard create React app. So we're just going to use npx to call create React app. And so it's going to take a minute to build this, downloading all the packages and such to build up that React app. Now you can see here it's actually running through building this app with Yarn 1.22.4. That is the latest version of Yarn, and you should definitely upgrade your global version of Yarn to the latest. That will make everything so much simpler because it has the maximum amount of compatibility with Yarn 2. Progressing fairly smoothly. You can also, if you want to take a look at the current console output, and then as we once we upgrade to Yarn 2, you can compare them and see which one you like better. Any questions so far? All right. I think we're close to done. So building these native packages are kind of a pain. So let's cd into this this folder, and we can yarn start, and I'll start it up, and you can see. All right. Guess it's taking a second, but let's see what happens there. All right, it's running. So let's kill this, and then we can let's upgrade. Let's go ahead and upgrade this app to Yarn 2. Pretty straightforward. Yarn PaLOusa. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Yarn set version berry. Just like that. Okay, let's do a yarn install. Here's the output from the install. You can see the various warnings that we're encountering. Kind of a cool feature that I discovered. You can actually click on these errors and it will bring up the documentation for that error code, which I think is awfully slick. It's doing the install now. As you can see, it's saying all of these can't be found in the cache, so it's got to download them. All right, while it's doing this, let's okay. Okay. What was it? It was CPL CRA dash XML. Interesting. Oh, okay. There we go. And then let's see what happened. Almost done over here. Installing all those packages. There's quite a few of them. Let's open this out in VS Code. Take a look at the actual structure. So you can see it's now got the yarn.yarn folder with a cache folder, and that contains all the zip files, all the packages. You can see that our yarn berry. So berry is the, sorry, I should have explained that earlier. Berry is the code name for Yarn 2. And so that's stored in there. And then unplugged is the packages that actually have to be unpacked from the repo. Now, let's see if this is finished. All right, that's complete. And remove the node modules. Let's do a yarn start. Oh, I can, yes, thank you. Let me zoom a little. Just a second, it seems to be doing some processing. And here you can see that starting up our project with Yarn 2. Give it just a second. There we go. That is our base create React app running with Yarn 2. Let me close this down and I will increase the font size. Is that better? All right. So we can also, it actually works with TypeScript as well. Just a moment here. So thanks to some impressive work from Mel, the lead maintainer, he actually, after significant discussions with the TypeScript team, let me pull this up. I'm not going to show you the whole thing because you don't want to watch me do that again. But we will, I'll open up this one and you can see this is a TypeScript project that's been upgraded to Yarn 2. And we can also run this in just the same way with Yarn Start. So after significant discussions with the TypeScript team was a little resistant to enabling compatibility with Yarn 2 for a couple different reasons, and there's still a lot of work happening there. But having his PR declined, he actually developed a method to patch the TypeScript package with the very few small changes. So that happens automatically when you're using Yarn 2. It's pretty slick. You can see here, we're now running the TypeScript app with Yarn 2 as well. So this is kind of boring, right? That was a little too easy. So let's do something, take on a slightly more challenging task. And that's upgrading a real production Gatsby project. So the one that we're going to upgrade today, let's close all of these. There we go. Okay, is the website for the Momentum conference, which is a conference that I run. Just checking in here to see if I have any questions. All right. And I will make sure to zoom in VS Code as well. All right. Is that big enough for now? All right, so in order to do, excellent. Okay, with this one, we're actually going to follow through the docs. So I'm going to pull up the migration docs. Give me just a second. And we're just going to go through them step by step. So we've already upgraded our global version of Yarn. We're going to go into the project directory, and we're going to perform the following steps. Yarn set version berry is going to enable the version 2. All right, we're going to close this window. C. W. Here's our website. Excellent. Let's paste in there. That's going to install the new berry v2. And then, here's all of the steps here. Now we're going to decide whether we want 0 installs, and we are going to use 0 installs for this. So it's very simple. We just take this section here and we copy that into our git ignore. Here's the current get ignore. We'll add that in there. Next step is we aren't relying on any changes in the npm-rc or yarn-rc, so we don't have to worry about step 5. And then we're going to go ahead and commit those changes to make a nice clean commit. So, we want to branch first. Excellent. Upgrade yarn 2. Go ahead and commit all those changes. You can see that it was just the new yarn version and a couple of little files there. We can take a look if anybody's interested, but it's going to get more interesting here in just a second. It was the yarn rc.yaml and the new yarn version. You can see it right here. Then we're going to run yarn install, and that's going to do a lot of the work here. So you can either run yarn install or just yarn, which is the same thing. If you're not familiar with yarn, not having a second argument there, we'll just run install. Now, let's drop this so that you can see a little more clearly. If we zoom out, you can just see more clearly how nicely just a second here. The output is. It very clearly states what it's doing right now. It's all part of the resolution step. Now it's gotten into the fetch step. And it's fetching all the packages that we're going to need. While it's doing that, let's take another look at the next steps in this. We're going to run yarn install, and then we're going to commit the new changes. Now, after that, we're going to try running, and we're going to see what happens. And we're also, so I can tell you in advance that it's not going to run because I've tried this, as you would hope. Before I demo something, I would at least try it. It's finishing the package install. Now, again, the beautiful thing about this is once these packages are installed, we won't need to do that again. We don't have to wipe our node modules and reinstall. It's not a thing we're going to have to do. It's doing the link step now. I think essentially what it does in the link step is building that pmp.js. Pmp.js is a file that Yarn uses to determine where to find the appropriate packages. Now it's going to build the native packages. One unfortunate thing about node packages is the native ones have to be built on a per project. They get built in the project because it has to be built specifically for that platform. So that tends to take a lot of time. One of the direction that packages are going and the packages should be going in Node is to using, instead of native things like Python, using WebAssembly instead. And that means that they're going to be compatible on all different systems. All right. Again, we can click on these various things and I'll find it for us. I guess maybe that's an iTerm thing. I just found that today, actually, the clicking on the error message is pretty slick. All right, go ahead and build. Come on. Almost there. So one of the things that we'll look at here, we're going to run the doctor after it fails, And then we're going to look at this. We're going to fix our dependencies with package extensions. This is a part of, this is an extension of the fact that PNP is more strict than using node modules. So if a package does not declare a dependency on another package, it will be unable to access that package. That's because it's an unsafe access. It wants to call that out. Whereas when you're just putting files into node modules, the package manager is out of the way at that point, and so there's no way to know whether there's that unsafe dependency or not. Once we run into if we run into these issues, essentially what we're going to discover is there's several different ways to fix them, and some of which are better than others. The easiest way that we could fix these problems is by using the node modules linker, and that will essentially stop using PNP and compile everything into node modules. Alternatively, we could use one of the things we could do is use the PNP loose policy, and that will enable fallbacks for to the way that node modules would work in that case. So if the package is depending on something and it would have gotten it otherwise, it'll still work and it'll emit a warning as a result. Did something die here? I'm concerned. I'm going to go ahead and restart this just to be safe. Oh, here we go. Let's try this again. All right, that's completed. Now, let's run. We're going to run yarn develop, and that is going to build our Gatsby site, and then it will essentially act as if you haven't worked with Gatsby before, this is a mode where you can make edits and it'll immediately appear in your project. It's a hot reload essentially. Oh, and we are encountering all kinds of issues now at this point. So now what we're going to do, because I kind of know what problem we're encountering here, I'm going to go ahead and upgrade all my packages. And I'm going to do it kind of an ugly way. I'm just going to delete my yarn lock. And that's going to allow me to say, upgrade everything as high as you can. And this way we'll create a new yarn lock, and it'll download all the packages necessary. So you can see the problems we've encountered with using these old versions of the packages. So now we'll see what happens here once we have upgraded those. Notice there are still some old things in here, some deprecated packages. That is a result of dependencies. And maybe I should take that up with Gatsby or some of these other packages themselves. But it's fetching the newest versions of these packages now. So those are things you definitely want to be aware of. There's other ways that you kind of have to. So when you're running, you can no longer run just jest. You want to say yarn jest, so that it actually will inject the appropriate variables into Node to give it the right startup. You can also use PNP and so some IDEs don't yet have support for PNP, and so you have to use something called PNP and which essentially fakes out the IDE into thinking that there is a node modules folder when there actually isn't. Again, all of these things will come along with time, but the great news is that we've come a long way already, and a lot of packages are now compatible. Let's see what we got here. Almost done. Yes. I'm just in link step now. So this is, again, just kind of paging through documentation. Definitely worth looking through here. This is what you use if you can't use PNP because of certain requirements. I would definitely peruse the docs if that is interesting to you. There's also some nice blog posts as well that Mail has compiled. All right, we're done. Let's do a yarn start and see. Well, yeah, maybe we should go ahead and commit, I think. Would be the best thing. Let's add all these changes. There's a fair few of them because it's all the packages that we are adding. All right. Here we go. Go ahead and start this up. Oh, something's not right. What am I doing wrong here? Oh, that's odd. Hold on just a second. Did this run wrong? Of course, you get something you've never seen before, right? Oh, I don't have a start. I've got a yarn develop and a yarn build. Those are the two that I have. Start is not a script in the package JSON, which I can show you right here. Of course, if you try to run a script that's not in the package JSON, it's just not going to work. As you can see here, there's no start. So let's try yarn develop. Okay. Apologize for the delays, but that's just kind of par for the course with doing these kind of things. See what happens. All right, so we've got an error, and Gatsby tried to access Babel types, but it isn't declared in its dependencies. This is an example of where yarn PNP is stricter, and Gatsby's trying to depend on it. So we can look here. Let's go back to these docs here, and we can look at the package extensions. So essentially, we need to set this up for our Gatsby dependencies. Now, since I've already done this, I don't want you to have to wait while I put this together. Let me just copy in the code that we need into our yarn RC YAML. Did I lose it? Of course I did. No worries. Just a moment here. This is what we need. We'll open up the yarn RC YAML. There we go. Paste that in. So the package that we need to patch, we need to extend is Gatsby. You can see down here. And the one that it needs, but it doesn't declare, is at Babel/types. Okay. So let's try this again. See what happens. So this is essentially saying, hey, I know that Gatsby didn't declare this dependency, but go ahead and let it use it. Let's see, we've got another error here. Aha. Let's see. Oh, I remember. So I updated the yarn RC YAML, but I didn't run a yarn, which means the PNP.js, which tells it where to find things, it doesn't know where to look. Give it just a second here. It's going to rebuild Gatsby. All right, now let's try yarn develop. Yes, I did commit all the installed packages. So that is using, so in this case, we're using what's called the zero install method, which means that I can directly clone the repository, do yarn develop, and it's going to run. It's not going to require any network access. It's just going to have all those packages ready to go as soon as I clone the repository. It is going to make that repository a little larger, but it's definitely something that Git can handle. They've talked to GitHub. It's totally okay. Now, let's see what's happening here with our yarn develop. Okay, we had another failure. So Gatsby source API server tried to access Babel polyfill, and so it threw another error. So let's fix that. I apologize. I did have this already written. I just happened to drop the ball. So we just need to copy this. Paste it in there. Oh, what is that? Down here. And then we take the name of the package that is not, doesn't have the proper dependencies declared. And we will add the package it does recommend, it does need. Now, the appropriate thing to do, the best thing to do here is, I've discovered this, so I really should raise an issue with that repository to let them know, hey, you're using a package that you don't depend on. We need to take care of that. Even better, I could make a pull request to add that as a dependency. All right, it's doing their R install. Linking. It's going to see what happens here. I'm going to go ahead and add the commit this so it's really clear. What I've done here is I've added these package extensions that were necessary. Okay. Let's run yarn develop and see what we get. Come on, Gatsby. So you can see here, you're asking about committing the cache. So I've committed the cache folder, and I've committed the releases folder. The unplugged, and that's based on what I've added in the git ignore here. If you didn't want to commit your cache folder, that's okay too, but you are going to have to install those packages every time you clone fresh. Which isn't the end of the world, but I think it's really cool to be able to run a CI job without ever having to go out to that external repository. Let's see how this is going. Running the page queries. Okay. All right, so we've had another issue here. This is actually a mistake that we've made ourselves. So we have required a prep package in the website prop types, and we haven't actually added that as a dependency. That's super easy to handle. We just add it. So Yarn caught that mistake, but you still need to have internet to clone the repo. Correct. We would still need the internet to clone the repo the first time, but we would not need to go out to that package repository after we cloned the repo. We wouldn't have to run a full install. So let's see here. We've added prop types. Let's try and run now. Let's see what we encounter. One of the other things that we could do instead of adding those package extensions is running in that PNP loose mode, as I discussed before, which would essentially say, I understand that we don't have these packages declared, but just do it anyway. It's going to be fine. Now we'll see if we run into any more errors in this one. Let's go ahead and commit that change. Add type package. So we didn't, you'll notice I didn't actually add a package here. I'm not actually committing a package because I already had that package committed. It was already part of my cache. I just needed to specifically declare that dependency so the PNP knew to find it. So now it's part of the yarn lock, and the PNP generating the image thumbnails. Let's see what happens. So as you can see, I'm running into a few different difficulties as I'm going through this upgrade, but Gatsby is not a trivial platform to upgrade. It does a lot of things behind the scenes to make the site efficient and make it so that it's really easy to access. Gatsby, if you're not familiar with, is a static site generator. So it's essentially building each HTML page and building static pages, building JavaScript bundles as well. Okay. We have one more that we forgot to require, and that's moment, so that it's failing because of that. Okay. So let's go ahead and add that. And now get that all fixed up. It's going to moment dependence. Commit that as soon as it's done. It's going to update the PNP.js to make it clear about that dependency in this link step. Very good. Now that we will run. It'll run cleanly. All right. So there's a couple of files in here you definitely want to ignore. This build state YAML and the install state GZ. These are simply files for optimization. And then this here, this is a Gatsby file that it uses. So one of the things to be aware of is if you are running an older version of Yarn, older than like 1.22, that it will not read from the Yarn RC YAML. It'll read from the Yarn RC instead. And so in that case, either you need to make sure that you're always running with a newer version of, it's still going to use this cat. So if you're running with Yarn 1.22 or anything above that, it will make sure to use this Yarn path. But if you are not, if you're running with a lower version, it only looks at .yarnrc, which is the older version of the file. As a result, you may want to create a yarnrc file that points to this yarn path, and that should fix that for you. All right, it's running the page queries. Let's see what happens. Any other questions right now about what we're doing here? Does everything make sense so far? Take a look at the, so this is the output that it's building, that is the public directory. That's what it's going to serve. Excellent, okay. All right. This error, I've been seeing this, but it actually doesn't cause any problems that I've seen. So that's fantastic and great. We are built, it is running, and you can see that the site is running smoothly. No problems. We can click through the pages. We can open up the modals. Everything's working properly, which is great. We can also, if we want, to try creating production build, we use Gatsby build, yarn build And you can see in my package JSON, I've actually specifically stated that as a script, Gatsby build. So let's see how this one goes. A note when you are running Gatsby, if possible, you always want to run the yarn Gatsby build or npm Gatsby build, because running just straight Gatsby build will actually run the globally installed version of Gatsby. And that may or may not be what you want. It probably isn't what you want, because you want to run the version that's installed in your package. So don't use the global Gatsby if possible. All right, so let's take a look here. We're having a problem. We can see the Gatsby plugin offline is creating an issue through an error while running the create pages lifecycle. Now, this is kind of, I actually know the solution to this one, and this is a great little segue. Again, you want to make sure that you're running the most up-to-date version of your packages, because those are the ones most likely to be compatible with Yarn 2. If you've got some that are really behind, you're more likely to run into problems. So if we simply upgrade to Gatsby plugin offline 3, and then we do a yarn, that'll install the upgraded version of that plugin. How much time I have? All right, I'm running out of time here. Thank you for your patience. I know this is the last session of the last day, so it's really kind that you stuck with me. So thank you so much for that. All right, now that we have plugged that in, we should be good to go. We can run the yarn build, and it will build our site for us. So since we're running out of time, I'll go ahead and jump back to the slides, and then if we have time at the end, I'll show the actual running site. Oh, just realized sharing the wrong. Stop sharing. Okay. So I do recommend that you try Yarn 2. I think it's pretty awesome. I think you'll like it. If there's something you don't like, you can also help to make it better. The Yarn team is extremely friendly, and they will receive your comments. It doesn't mean that they will do everything that you ask, but especially if there's a PR, they'll typically work with you to make things work. So I just want to thank everybody so much for sticking with me and watching this demo. Let me, since it's now finished building, I'll go ahead and show you that. So I would, yes, I would recommend at least attempting to move existing Yarn/npm projects to version 2. I think that there's lots to gain, and there's a lot of, even if PnP doesn't work for you, Yarn 2 is a fantastic package management solution. So definitely want to check that out. So now that it's finished building, we can go ahead, doing the wrong thing. Something is strange. All right, so we're going to use yarn serve in this case, and we'll serve up the production version of our site. Since we've already built, this doesn't take long at all. All right, And now we can view our site in the browser. Excellent. Anybody have any questions? Is anybody excited about Yarn 2 and want to move? We want to give it a try, or PnP? Who loves node modules? Who wants to keep using node modules? That's fantastic. I definitely recommend checking it out, looking into it. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever, and I'll be happy to help. So also the Yarn team is extremely helpful as well. I definitely recommend looking at the docs and checking those out. They answer a lot of my questions. I'll stick around for a few minutes if anybody has any questions. Yeah, enjoy your weekend and have a fun evening. And good luck with your node projects, your Yarn 2 node projects.